not long ago I purchased this 200mm f4 lens from ASKAR, and this is a lens that is built for astrophotography to have pinpoint stars across a whole full frame sensor like this camera here, the Pentax K1 full frame camera. But if you've seen my previous videos, and I'll put links above, you will see that I had some struggles with star shapes and that I was getting oblong star shapes. And I wasn't sure whether I was at fault or the lens was at fault. I decided to find out, and this is an update video. Hey guys, Quiv the Lazy Geek here and welcome back to the channel. So today we're looking at this ASKAR 200mm f4 lens that has had overall great reviews, which is why I was surprised when I got those oblong star shapes with the sample that I had received. And a lot of the comments and what I thought I saw was not an issue with the lens, but an issue with tilt of the sensor with regards to the lens. So I did do quite a lot of other tests with my sample of the lens with other cameras. So I tried with an APS-C EOS M50 Mark II camera, brand new, the camera that's being used currently to record this video. And I also tried with my 1600mm Cool camera, and I saw those oblong stars in both of those other cameras. I also tried to add a tilt adapter in the imaging train between the lens and my ASI 1600mm Cool camera, to no effect. I was never able to get rid of those oblong stars, regardless of how much I played with the tilt adapter. And so I contacted the seller of those lenses in Japan, Citron Japan, and I was able to send them back my lens for examination and repair as necessary. And they checked the lens, they saw that my sample indeed was troublesome, and they replaced it by another lens sample. They kept the same dovetail and stuff, but they replaced the actual lens with a new lens that they had tested. And so now I have a good lens sample, which means that yes, this lens has the potential to be really good. I've seen samples from Nico Carver, aka Nebula Photos, from that lens. I'll put a link above as well to his videos, where he has a good sample of the lens. I've seen on cloudy nights a lot of people with good samples, but I've also seen on cloudy nights a couple of people reporting bad sample of the lens, and I've had one of my subscribers describe to me the exact same symptoms that I had with sample images and those oblong stars, and that particular subscriber was told that this was within specs of the lens, which is a bit worrisome. And overall it does mean that there is a definite variability in the lenses. So when you're buying it, there is some lottery going on, which is almost always the case for telescopes or mounts, except if you're buying like Astrophysics or Takahashi, for instance. And we've seen such variability with other telescopes. So I've had people telling me about horrible star shapes they got on their Red Cats, on their Space Cats, on their Star 71, on their whatever refractor they have. So yeah, it's not unique, let's say, and it's not surprising in any way. But it still means that if you do get that lens, you want to test it out on a full frame sensor as quickly as possible to check if you have any issues with it. But let's have a look at how the lens looks like on the computer. Okay, and now you're seeing a sample image taken directly from the camera. I just applied a screen transfer function to it, and immediately, so there's no flat, no calibration going on. Immediately I can see that the frame is really flat overall. I mean, there's a bit of darkening in the corners, but that is quite impressive in terms of the lack of vignetting. Like, yeah, there's a bit of vignetting in those corners here, but that's a really good result overall. And if we look into the star shapes, obviously in the center they're good, and I used a bad enough mask to do some focusing. And if we do some pixel peeping, we can see that to the left hand side they start to get out of focus. Not so much oblong, but out of focus, which is what I expect out of some field curvature slash potentially tilt on my lens, on my camera. If I look at the top left, we see out of focus, maybe oblong shapes as well, but that is a bit more expected. And same on the bottom left, out of focus and oblong shapes. Kind of what I expect. Bottom right is actually much better. Top right is slightly oblong, slightly out of focus, so there's definitely some tilt going on, but this is something that I can recognize as tilt, and I know it's something that I can fix, plus it's probably not something that I care enough about to fix. The star shapes are fine overall. If we look at an aberration spotter, this is what we get, so we see immediately all of the star shapes across the frame. If I'm not pixel peeping, you'd be hard pressed to say like, okay, those stars in the corners are not good. I mean, they're not as good as in the center, but they're definitely okay. And yeah, so this is what I was expecting from that lens. So now I'm very satisfied with the quality of the lens that I have. I'm still left with an issue, which is how I am going to use that lens. I was initially thinking about that lens as kind of a portable setup for travel to pair maybe with my AZ GTI mount in equatorial mode. But this lens with the camera, this whole assembly is a bit over 3 kilograms. That's a lot of weight. It will kind of work on the AZ GTI, but it's kind of pushing it. And that's not all. If you know me, you know that I'm lazy, and a part of being lazy for me is having autofocus on my imaging equipment. And because this is a lens with a helical focuser, adding autofocus to that is not quite straightforward. Well, it is actually straightforward. There are several offerings to adapt an autofocuser or an electronic focuser to the lens. There's actually an offering from Sharpstar, the makers of this lens, to adapt a ZW EAF focuser to the lens, which is great. There's also a solution from Deep Sky Dad to adapt either their own focuser or an EAF to the lens. The problem with either of those solutions is that they will put the focus motor between the dovetail here and the lens. So it's moving the center of gravity of the lens assembly, like the part that is the heaviest here. It's actually moving it away from the axis of rotation of my mount. And what this means is that the torque applied by this lens will increase quite a lot by adding an autofocuser to this. Now with my AZ GTI, as I've set it up between the axis of rotation of the RA axis and the center of gravity roughly of this lens assembly, I have 14 centimeters. So 3 kilograms, 14 centimeters away. When the mount is pointing to the meridian, that means that I have 420 Newton centimeters of torque. If I add 6 centimeters, which is the actual distance added by the Sharpstar focusing adapter between the dovetail and most of the mass, most of the weight of the assembly. So if I add 6 centimeters between the dovetail and the lens to fit a focus motor, this becomes 600 Newton centimeters. So we've increased the torque just by doing that by 50%. Plus there's the added weight of the focuser itself. That's not good. So that means we have a lot of torque on that poor little mount, and it's actually too much for the mount. And then if we add like a guide scope on top, it gets a bit too heavy for my mount. So it means that while this lens optically is awesome, now that I have a replacement, I'm not sure exactly how I will be using it. So that's a bit of an issue. So I'm looking into possibilities, but it is definitely something I definitely had not thought through when I bought this lens. So yeah, I'm thinking about that. What am I going to do with this lens now that I have a good sample? If you have suggestions, please let me know down in the comments below. But overall, that's all that I wanted to talk about or touch upon in this video. I just wanted to let you know that if you are planning on buying this lens, or if you already have bought it, you really want to check it with a full frame sensor. And if you have multiple cameras to check it with multiple cameras. See if you have like obvious optical issues with the lens that are not related to tilt. And if you do, check with your reseller about getting a replacement lens for that. Now that I do have a replacement lens, it's awesome. And from the comments that I've seen on the internet, most people get a good sample from the get-go, which is, you know, what I would expect. It's just that I was unlucky. I got a bad sample. I've seen others get bad samples, and that means that you should check for bad samples. Overall, once you get a good sample, this lens, I think, like in terms of image quality across the full frame sensor with minimum vignetting and very little star shape degradation, it's really, really good. And that's it for my update on the ASKAR 200mm f4 lens. So thank you so much for watching. If you like astrophotography, astronomy in general, feel free to go down below and consider clicking that subscribe button and notification bell icon. If while you're at it you may want to put a like on the video or a dislike, it just tells Google that there is some activity and interest in the video and it's really helping the channel out. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions or ideas about how to use this lens. And yeah, that's pretty much it. More important than everything else, as always, whenever you can, don't forget to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.